A peek at a big ear telescope makes a researcher scribble "wow" in the margins on a printout. A big firefight lasts for hours in Los Angeles, but are the targets really from this earth? A farmer finds debris on his land. According to some, this is the start of the largest cover-up in US history. Hi, hello and welcome to Digging Up Ancient Aliens. This is the podcast where we examine the TV show Ancient Aliens. Do their claims hold water to an archaeologist, or are there better explanations out there? I'm your host, Fredrik, and this is episode 9. And today we have something special prepared for all of you. Today we will break down episode 5, and this is the season finale, and for that we have a very special guest with us today. But before that, remember that sources, resources and reading suggestions are attached to the show notes, and you can find them also on our website, diggingupancientaliens.com. There you can also find contact info if you notice any mistakes or have any suggestions. And if you do like the podcast, I would really appreciate if you left one of those fancy 5-star reviews that I've heard so much about. I will, of course, thank you by name in the next episode, but enough of me jammering. I want to welcome our guest Blake Smith from Monstertalk and In Research Of to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're much welcome. Blake, have you had any previous encounters with ancient aliens? I know that you have talked a little bit about it in the past on Monstertalk, at least.
Yeah, it's one of those topics we don't talk about on Monstertalk a lot because it is, I guess if aliens are monsters, it's monster adjacent, but it comes up a lot on my other podcast In Research Of, because so much of that's tied to the birth of that's the show where we watched the television show In Search Of, which was a paranormal show. It's one of the earliest of these type shows in the 1970s. It was hosted by Leonard Nimoy. And that show literally has a direct lineage with Von Daniken. So it was produced through Alan Landsberg, who was fascinated with the Von Daniken books. And he had Rod Serling come in and narrate an American version of the original Chariots of the Gods documentary. And then that led to several TV specials, and eventually they got the series together. But by then Serling had died of surgery. He had heart surgery, and it didn't work out very well. I think anytime you die in surgery, that's not a great outcome. But it ends up they go with Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock, as the host. And so it became this incredibly influential bit of 1970s in early 80s culture. And so much of it is about ancient aliens, especially during the first season. It's just like every other episode has a wild, and it's not as bad as Ancient Aliens, but it is a crazy litany of talking about different sites and mysteries in the past without ever having a legitimate scientist to give context or any, historical or archaeological context that could explain this stuff. It's just a big building, a mystery, some people that couldn't possibly have built this. It's over and over and over. So.
But did you see a lot of similarities between In Search Of and Ancient Aliens? Do they have the same pedigree, or?
They have a lot of the same DNA. I would say, obviously, Ancient Aliens is slicker because it's got all these fancy computer graphics. And I think Ancient Aliens is much more open about their agenda. Like, that exactly what it is. In Search Of sort of positions itself as being a scientific inquiry into these mysteries. And largely, a lot of these episodes do include counter narratives. So you get a scientist and a believer in these sort of fringe ideas, and they both are presented, and so that's nice. But that sort of thing didn't really stick, did it? I think it became obvious that people really enjoy. This is almost like, if you don't mind my saying so, it's sort of space alien pornography. Like, it's just like, if you like Ancient Aliens, this is, it's all the good shots, it's just aliens did it, so it's much more up in your face with the Ancient Aliens, and humans aren't capable of anything, and don't worry, the aliens are watching it. What's interesting, I haven't seen a full spectrum of the shows, but they keep acting like the aliens are going to do one of two things. They're going to save us, or they're going to destroy us. There's no kind of middle ground, and I don't know if they deal with, but the alien abduction stuff, I find is an interesting phenomena. And I don't mean interesting like I think there really are, abductions, but I think it's interesting, the psychology of it and the way it ties into things like sleep paralysis and legends of incubus and succubus. That stuff is really interesting. But if you believe that aliens are visiting and also probing us and experimenting on us and making baby hybrids, that's sinister, and it's not fun. And they're not here just to help us stack rocks in pretty shapes, so.
Yeah, but they are quite, since you haven't seen the whole first season. First of all, you would have noticed how much better their video production has become on the CGI, the computer graphics. In the first episode, it looked like someone's 12-year-old nephew had done it under protest.
Yeah, nice.
So it was horrible, but now it's evolved, so to say.
It might be that the first episode as a pilot was a proof of concept, and then they got the budget for the better stuff later, maybe? I'm just guessing.
Might be. Actually, there's one pilot that I haven't seen previously to the series. So it was a separate first episode, but it will be a later thing. But they even talk in, I think it's episode 3, about how aliens created the human race as a slave race for their gold mining, because their atmosphere lacking gold, as you need.
Yeah, they should just go to the pawn shop.
But they would only got a bit of pocket lint and 250.
That's so bizarre. I mean, the universe is really big, and I don't think you need to come to Earth to get gold. I'm pretty sure just the same geology exists all over the universe. So
yeah, but
it's a long ride. It's a long ride just to come get some shiny rocks. So
it's a very long ride. But yeah, so they disproved evolution previously in the episode.
Oh wow,
yeah,
that's interesting.
It was, of course, aliens that started the whole thing. Don't ask them where the aliens came from, but
I shouldn't start off with a rant, but that's one of those things that really bothers me, because it's I'm a technology freak. I love innovations, and you don't get innovation without natural selection.
No.
And I mean, so it's the same principles. There's selective forces at play in the invention of things, right? So you, like, something that happens in your head, like, I'm going to make a set of stairs or whatever it is you're building. You eliminate, I'm not going to make this out of spaghetti. So I'm not going to make this out of feathers. You eliminate a lot of things you don't even think about. So there's all these things that just are never tried, because in your head, you're trying things out and you go, that wouldn't work. That wouldn't work. That wouldn't work. So you try the things you think will work. And then when they don't, you innovate, you iterate. And eventually you get something that's great. And everybody's like, how could that be? How did you come up with it? Like, well, you did a lot of work. And our human ancestors did a lot of work. One of the people in this episode is Bill Burns, and he teamed up with a guy named Corso at one point and wrote a book. I think it's called The Day After Roswell. And that is, to me, one of the most offensive books ever, because there's a whole section where they imply that computer technology came from crashed aliens. And I'm like, no, it didn't. There's a really beautiful, rich history, a very well publicized history of how we got to now. And it has nothing to do with crashed spaceships. It has everything to do with hard work, innovation, and collaboration. So
yeah, it's the same with the pyramids that they brought up in the first episode. We have this evolution of pyramids, from the ancient sand pit burials to the mastabas to the step pyramids, and then a couple failed attempts on a true pyramids, and then we have a pyramid, because aliens would otherwise have traveled several thousands of years to get here and then failed to build a pyramid.
Right, right, exactly. Like the aliens didn't need to go through iterations, right?
No.
I mean, that's just, anyway, it's a ridiculous premise, but we're not here to like just talk it down. I'm sure we're going to step through this episode and talk about interesting mistakes.
Yeah, and let's open where they are opening. So first they blast us with a few X-Files posters, District 9s, and asking us where all these alien movies comes from. I'm a bit disappointed that they didn't have a Mars Attack poster. But other than that, intro, well, mostly to catch your attention. And then they move into something they love to do, pull up some old text and claim that something is in there somewhere. So this time they claim it's a Sanskrit text that apparently referenced that there's 400,000 human-like creatures in the universe. And I did some digging because, of course, they don't reference where they got it. They just tell us, oh, it's a Sanskrit text, it's ancient, trust us. You don't need to look this up. But from what I could find, it could be Padma Purana. And it has this passage in it, but it seems to, I'm not sure really what they want to prove with it, because it's a religious text.
Exactly, yes, yes. Well, there's just like in cryptozoology. Cryptozoology has a problem where it's kind of tied in with colonialism, because people have beliefs in monsters. A lot of those beliefs are religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs, and then people from other countries in sort of the European American sort of style. Well, we're very science based, so I hear you. You think there's a monster, but obviously that's really it's an ape. Yeah. It's a kind of bear. It's a kind of lion. So they're basically taking a spiritual idea and reducing it down to a natural explanation. Maybe there's nothing. Maybe it's not real at all. Maybe it's just a spirit, like a piece of folklore or religious mythology or something. So in this case, I think that's a Westerners coming in with their ideas and taking these Hindu texts or whatever religion it might be from another culture, and then trying to say, aha, you're talking about gods and mythology, but really this is a Federation of Space text. This is your primitive memory of working with space people, and it's like, okay, no, and they do that a lot. There's also the, sort of flying cities and nuclear bomb sort of interpretations. Oh, and they do it to Christian texts too. I mean, people think that Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed by atomic weapons. That's a really popular ancient alien idea.
Yeah,
so.
It was previously in the season, and you might not know this, but the Ark of the Covenant, that's a radioactive generator.
It's a radio to God. Did you know that? I learned that in a documentary.
Yeah. You also have the manna machine from the Exodus.
Yeah. That's so it's not God dropping food from the sky.
No, it was an alien machine, but primitive
it was manufactured.
people.
That's terrible. Are puns okay? Are your audience going to be bothered by that?
I think they will be just fine.
Okay,
you can pun away. I couldn't find the exact quote here. I could only find it on sites that seems to be related to Hare Krishna sects. So I'm not really completely sure about it, but anyway, it's iffy at best. And then they do this thing that they tend to do in later episode, at least, that they start to talk about things that's actually quite interesting. So they talk about Drake and radio telescope and start of SETI.
Yeah, yes, exactly. It was interesting. They say, Frank Drake built his own telescope, and then they talk about it as though he invented radio astronomy in the 1960s. So like in 1960, he makes this experiment, which was a very interesting experiment, right? But radio astronomy actually started a long time before, and I don't remember the dates off the top. It's early 1930s. I remember there's a whole issue where scientists were looking for evidence of sort of background radiation from this, the Big Bang. And at the same time, telephone technology people were trying to figure out how to get rid of this weird static they were hearing on all their equipment. And they kept trying and trying. And they realized, oh, we're not going to get rid of this static. This is the static from the creation of the universe, right? And so the Nobel Prize ends up going to the Bell Labs people who were trying to clean up the system instead of the scientists who were literally searching for this. It's a great story. But the first radio telescope was actually built in 1937, a little bit after that. So once it was widely known that this was out there, then people understood stars were emitting radiation, and you could actually receive that information and do stuff with it. And boy, it's been almost 100 years of radio telescope work, and it's really transformed our understanding of the universe. Great science.
Yeah, as I said, it's part that they could have made a whole episode on and had a better outcome.
Yeah, they certainly could have. They get this budget and they have these great, but this is, they're telling a different kind of story,
Yeah.
How's language on this? Like, what do you have any restrictions about what words we say? Is it?
No, I'm not picky there. You can.
Okay, because a lot of this is bullshit. So I like to say bullshit when I see it, and there's a lot of bullshit on here. So, but they kind of like, it's bullshit decorated. It's got points in it where they do some real science, and then they hop right back to the nonsense. And so that mixture, if you eat a big spoonful of bullshit and science, you're still eating bullshit. You can't you can't just keep spitting out the bullshit and trying to swallow the science. So it's a tough.
It's, I think, also a way to make it more credible, because you have these real things and then you mix it with the fantasy part, and the viewer will think that because of the real things, the fantasy part is more reasonable to be true to, which of course is great for them, but more work for others to double check. And something that made me a bit disappointed, or not disappointed, but maybe curious, is why they left out so much about the wow signal.
Yeah,
I would have thought that they would have focused in heavily on that, really dig down, because that's an actual mystery for scientists and AA theorists alike there.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, well, the wow signal was picked up by the Big Ear telescope in Ohio State. But now I forgot when it was, basically.
I could obviously quickly check, but I think it was the early 1970s. Click, click, click. Got a very loud keyboard. 1977. So there you go.
Yeah, so they basically got a peak in their signals. Back then, they didn't really have computers, as I understood it, in this sort of way that we're used to. So they printed out the signals and had to go through it by hand, basically. And some noticed a spike, just wrote wow, and so far nobody has been able to really say what this is, but we haven't been able to find it again after it. But from the Ancient Aliens point of view, they could have really dug down there. Oh, scientists can't explain this. It's a bit weird.
It is an interesting and legitimate mystery. And unfortunately, it's one of those things where it hasn't been reproduced. And as a consequence, the word, I think, stochastic is a great word, where it's just like, it's something so random, that you can't predict it. So unless you're listening all the time, and we're not, because it takes money to listen. It takes money to operate these systems, which is why the whole SETI program is funded largely by donations, because nobody wants to pay to look. It's a great question. Everybody wonders, is there life out there in space? But nobody wants to pay to find out, and we've got people starving. And I'm like, yeah, but also, we tend to
we can care about more things.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, well, also we tend to give all our money to 1% of the people, and, make sure that they can have giant yachts and space programs so they can go to Mars and New Zealand and all those places. I don't know. I'm not going to get on a anti-capitalist rant, because I live in a capitalist system and I'm dependent upon it, and I'm very happy to have a job. But I think there's enough money floating around that you could do pure science and pure research. And it's unfortunate that that's not something people care enough about. So everybody can find a reason to not spend somebody else's money on something they don't care about, right? There's always that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but you could do both. There would be enough to go around.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's plenty of money. It's just not distributed very fairly. So.
And this episode was also a bit special for me because we moved quite far. We moved from the telescopes to the golden disc, for example, and they talk about the creation there. And I think it's a good 20 minutes before we get any weird things, to be honest. So the golden disc, it was a bit sad to see Sagan in this context.
Yeah,
I think he would have been a bit upset about this show.
Well, you notice they didn't have any video, right? They just had stock footage of it, like stock photos, right? Still photos. I think you can license still photography easier than you can get the family to allow you to use video. It's probably cheaper too to use still photos. But I don't know if they had to ask his estate, or like I think his wife's Adrienne.
Yeah, I don't think she would have allowed.
I don't think she would have either. and she worked very closely with him on the golden disc. I mean, like that was a project they worked on together. So I think her absence here is maybe important. But yeah, you see Sagan here, and I mean man, I grew up in this age, so like it was such a big deal that they were sending out these space probes, and then the idea there might be aliens and we're saying hello, and it's kind of absurd. It's like throwing a single grain of sand into the ocean and hoping some other person somewhere finds that grain of sand.
Yeah.
It's like, it's crazy, but it also, if you don't try, you're never gonna get anywhere. And we get data from it still. We still get data from it.
Yeah, and
then
also a bit of publicity stunt. I think people talk about space exploration and make it more interesting for the common person, in a sense.
And then we get the Star Trek The Motion Picture, which is all premised around the idea of one of these Voyager craft coming back, right?
Yeah.
Improved. Which brings us back to Leonard Nimoy, because it all goes back to In Search Of.
Of course. So here we have the connection, basically.
Yes, exactly.
And something I learned here, because they talk about Chuck Berry being on the record, Johnny Be Good, that song.
Yeah.
And I've always had the impression that they wanted to have Beatles on the record, because I heard it somewhere and never thought about checking it up. And the story is that they wanted to have Here Comes the Sun, but couldn't obtain the rights because Beatles were busy infighting about getting the rights to have it. Apparently that's a myth, I learned.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. That is the first Beatles myth I've ever heard. Was that? So, now, did this happen after Paul was replaced by a double? What?
Maybe that's why he was replaced.
That could be it. It's so it was so weird. I mean, it just seemed odd that they kept focusing on the fact that it had Chuck Berry, Johnny Be Good, but they didn't play any of that song. They just showed a picture of Chuck Berry and talked about it. I mean, there's so much on the disc, so many things. I love the thing about Bach, that was interesting too. So, and it's got instructions, and I love the solution they had. So some alien species finds this and they want to figure out, where did this come from? And so how can you know? And their clever solution was have a diagram that shows converging signals from pulsars that have different rates. So something kind of like a Morse code visualization that shows you the rate at which the pulsars are in the pattern of the emissions of radiation. And so by having all these convergent lines from different positions in space, if someone were to do so, they could kind of get a lot closer to finding our solar system, by having this point of reference. And that's fascinating because it's tied directly to radio astronomy, because the discovery of the pulsar, which they also didn't talk about, is an absolutely massive point, because there was a really serious belief that maybe we had found an ancient civilization, because we were seeing regular, repeated signals coming from another solar system. And it's like, whoa, what's going on here? What does this mean? And it took a while for them to realize it doesn't mean anything, but it's a scientifically interesting thing that there's a kind of star called a pulsar that has a regular pattern of radio emissions. So,
as I said, they could have done a much more interesting episode with so much truth in it.
Yeah. In fact, I'd have to recommend, there's an interesting series that came on in, I think it was 1980, called Cosmos. Also featuring Carl Sagan, only he talks. And it is, I think, 8 episodes, but it holds up so well. I rewatched it a few years ago. And I mean, obviously there's the new series with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Nothing against Neil, but man, Sagan really takes you on a tour de force of everything about what we know about the universe and the cosmos. It's such a great introduction. And thankfully my parents, although I think they don't even believe in evolution, but they let me watch it. They watched 1 episode with me and then they bailed, and I got to watch the rest by myself. And it's like me and Carl had some real bonding moments there, and I appreciate it. So
yeah, I can imagine. Yeah,
it was so good.
I haven't seen that. I only read his Demon Haunted World, though.
Yeah, which is another great book.
Yeah,
really, really good.
It's amazing. Something worth reading. But to return to the golden disc here and Sagan, we have Giorgio coming in, and we start to get the first hint of it. It's going to get off the rails soon, but he's talking about the fact that there's Sumerian on the disc. And sure, it can...
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you know by now, the Sumerians were the first civilization they contacted and created.
Yes.
So, of course, they wanted to put in, because Sagan was in on it, so they wanted to put in a Sumerian phrase so the aliens would, I don't know, remember us. I don't know. Exactly. It's like, oh, those guys. I remember those guys. It's like remember how they wouldn't use our digital technology. They only wanted to use clay tablets. It's so weird. Yeah, and the whole part there is actually quite interesting. Have you read Murmurs of Earth?
I have not.
So that's a book written by the team behind the Golden Disc. So I just started to read it, but I skipped to chapter 4 where Linda Salzman Sagan speaks about how they, decided on the different language and the creation of it. So basically they first wanted to have 2 languages, so the 2 biggest one and a dictionary to come with it. But they felt that wasn't really democratic. So they decided to take the biggest 24 to start with and then fill up with as many as possible if they had time over. So they apparently started with the 24 and then set up telephone chains, trying to find the native speakers of different languages. So we have, for example, Swedish on the disc. A very Swedish greeting. Hälsningar från en dataprogrammerare i den lilla universitetsstaden Ithaca på planeten jorden. So you could translate its greeting from a data programmer from the university town Ithaca on Earth. Except for a piece of weather. It's a very Swedish greeting. We love to talk about what we work with and where we live.
Nice. Well, it's almost like you're all role-playing game characters. It's like, I am John. I am the blacksmith. Do you need to buy weapons?
Oh, we have gotten better, but if you go back to 1920s, you still had people putting their work title on their gravestone.
Wow. Yeah? Now that's a commitment to a career.
So you had the miller and then the name, or the shoemaker, and it it wasn't just bankers or the top dogs. It was everyone in the society, Farmer Johnson. So yeah, you were very dedicated to your work.
Wow. I do too many things. I don't know what my gravestone would have my name and then like 23 other things that I do. I don't know what I am. That's like does too much. That's fantastic.
Anyway, Linda Sagan then moves on, and the reason why they have this ancient language, so they have, what is it, 4 Sumerian, Akkadian,
Adanesh lushulmo,
Latin,
salvete quicumque estis, bonam erga vos voluntatem habemus, et pacem per astra ferimus,
Hittite,
Ashuli,
and ancient Greek.
oitinis poteste chairete, Eirenikos prosphilus eleluthamen philoi.
And Linda, she says, quote, languages have historic importance. They were taken down from the shelf, dusted off, and allowed to shine in their own right. So basically they had time over and find someone who could speak it, and that's why it's on the disc.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think you can get an audio CD, listen to me, a CD. I think you can find online digital streaming versions of the Golden Disc. I believe that there's copies of the stuff that's on there that you can listen to.
Yeah, I think you don't have to look far. I think Wikipedia even have all the recordings readily available. So if you want to look closer in it. And as I said, Murmurs of Earth, great read if you want to know more about the Golden Disc creation.
Fantastic.
From the Golden Disc, we move to the Kepler telescope. And again, good documentary, I would say.
It was, yes. I was actually very impressed. They did a really lovely section here where they talk about how they use this Kepler telescope to seek out exoplanets. That's not hugging, kissing planets. It's EXO, or it's the idea of these planets outside of our solar system. And the way they do it is when those planets are rotating around their star, when the planet goes in front of the star, it slightly dims. It wouldn't be visible to us because it's, that's not that much dimming, but we have very sensitive equipment out there that can actually detect that change. And if it has a periodicity to it that's, reliable, then we know what we've got there is a planet orbiting the sun. And so I think when Kepler was a huge leap in our ability to see these things, and the number of exoplanets that we know about now has increased dramatically. And boy, it's all about to change, isn't it? So I'm very excited because over the Christmas break, we got the new telescope, the James Webb telescope, which is just an astonishing piece of technology. And I'm looking forward to seeing what it actually is able to detect. And I'm hoping with all my heart that it doesn't fail here at the last minute because it's overcome so many amazing. Well, it's got to do this. It's got to unfold. It's got to be packed. It's like origami. It's this amazing, big, giant set of lenses that have to go out and go in. And I think it's the first thing we've ever put into a Lagrange point. So it's in its own stationary location, a million miles from Earth, but being towed around by the sun. So,
but they're not afraid to hit the UFO that hides in the Lagrange zones.
That's a good point. Maybe that's what it's really there for. So.
Maybe. Yeah, but they even talk about the telescope in the episode.
Oh, I missed it. So I didn't hear they were talking about that. But that's like John the Baptist saying, "I'm just the prophet telling you about the Jesus that's to come." So.
Yeah, they didn't dig into it. They just briefly mention it, as I remember. But again, there's good science, or they talk about the Goldilocks zone and where we would find life in the universe and how we use microbial math, for example, to find signs of life in different places. And then they start to go off the rails because, you changed the names there. I'm not sure what happened, but we have George Nuri
exactly.
from Coast to Coast AM who wonders what would happen to us if we met another civilization that has 5 or 10 billion head start to find us.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I think people don't understand evolution very well. A civilization may last, thousands of years, maybe, but a species won't last millions of years. It'll be different over that amount of time. Like it literally goes through biological changes. It wouldn't even be the same animal anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know why everybody's hooked on this idea of these species have 10 billion years of extra, or whatever crazy number of time to develop technology. It's like, well, no, probably not. I mean, things right. We don't know what the culture of these others, creatures might be if they exist. And let me say, I'm very skeptical about the idea that aliens are visiting us, but I'm absolutely open and would be shocked if there's not other intelligent life in the universe. But the universe is really big, and I don't know if we'll ever meet these guys, so.
Yeah, and
or if we did, what would they be like? I don't know, but
Yeah, that's something they bring up in not sure in this episode, but at least in laters, that scientists believe in alien life. But, well, there's a difference between believing that in an infinite universe with infinite planets that there might be another intelligent species compared to the intelligent species have visited us to give us levitation guns to build pyramids. That's a bit of a difference.
Exactly. This like the thing they used to say when I was in high school is like, you're 1 in a million. It's like, yeah, okay, great. It's like, which means there's thousands of you over the world. I mean, there's lots and lots of you. It's like
pure statistically, yeah.
Exactly. So,
and then we come into War of the World broadcast. So they dip their toes in crazy, but then they switch to, not sure why they put this in, because there was other things they could have talked a bit more about.
Well, the idea I think they were trying to say was when the War of the Worlds broadcast happened in 1938, there's this story that what happened was people went nuts because the way the episode was presented, it was a dramatization.
Yeah.
It was presented over the radio. And if you didn't catch the beginning of it, you would assume you were listening to a live news broadcast and that everybody trusted the veracity and, that radio was a factual medium. And so when they tune in and they hear this broadcast, which is designed to sound like a normal broadcast being interrupted, that people panicked and went crazy and thought the world was coming to an end and picked up weapons, but the truth is a little bit more complicated, that there was this broadcast. I've listened to it. It's actually extremely well done. But it is clearly a drama.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not mysterious. And they do tell you during the broadcast that it is a dramatization. It does have ending credit. I mean, you know what I mean? It's clearly fictional. And also what happened was, this was at the time when the newspapers were really struggling to compete with radio.
Yeah.
People were really like people now may sit around and watch their tablets or their screens, but there was a window of time when people as a family would come together and watch TV. And before that, there was a time when they would come together and listen to the radio. Little Orphan Annie, The Shadow, there's all these shows they would listen to. And so the newspapers were struggling to keep up and try to keep their revenue streams. And so they kind of blew out of proportion how bad the panic was around this radio broadcast. And what they wanted was to kind of rein in the power of radio so that it couldn't do stuff like this, or to discredit it. Like, you can't trust radio. Look what they do. And so it was kind of a moral panic. And I think that's become the folklore. But I want to push back against that. There's a book by Robert Bartholomew and Ben Radford called, what is it called? Hold on a second. Lost the title. The Martians Have Landed. And it's a history of media-driven panics. And it is a great, really, Bartholomew is such a great researcher. He did very meticulous explanation of all this. So I'd say look that up. So.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. And from what I could gather, it seems as H.G. Wells might have also ridden on the fact that the papers picked up on it and then use it as a stepping stone to land better gigs, see what I could do with just radio, imagine what I could do with television or movies.
Oh, Orson Welles. Yes,
sorry,
yes. Yeah. No. I do that all the time because it's Orson Welles adapting H.G. Wells. Exactly. So, and I think, in fact, H.G. Wells should have still been alive. I think he lived into the start of World War II or right before it. But yeah, Orson, became kind of an auteur, where he go out and become, make his own movies and everything else.
But from the Panic of the Worlds, we dive deeper and we go to Battle of Los Angeles. Were you familiar with this event previously?
Boy, am I. Yes, absolutely. Not only am I familiar with it historically, but I also watched the movie from a few years ago with Aaron Eckhart, I think is, but it was like there was a combat. No, it's real aliens kind of thing happening. So, but no, that one was set in modern times, but basically I think it was called Battle LA, but it's the same idea.
Yeah, I think I saw that movie too, but I think I've forgotten it in self-defense.
Yeah. It was, I would give it like a C+. It did exactly what it said on the package, and no more, no less. It was people fighting in Los Angeles against aliens. That's what it was. So yeah. Anyway, this is a great skeptical story. Like if you're a skeptic about like people's perceptions. It's a story about we're at war with Japan, and America was already uptight because we'd been surprise attacked at Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And so everybody was afraid that the Japanese fleet was going to come up and, do an all-out attack on coastal cities. And I don't think it was widely known that Japan's whole deal with Pearl Harbor was to try to keep us out of the war, right? That it was a very strategic thing of, if we destroy their ships, then the Pacific Fleet will be gone. They won't have anything to bring over, ta-da!
Yeah, they will leave
America's
us
out
alone.
of the war.
Yeah.
Right. And but what it did was it scared, they call it awakening the sleeping giant, but it really terrified Americans. And so they had set up batteries to fight, basically everybody was set up for a coastal war and psychologically prepared for a coastal war. So when the air raid sirens started going off, everybody started shooting, and boom, people saw things. There were lights. If you see this newspaper photo that's a touched up photo that they've got there where it looks like there's a big ship in the middle, but it's clearly people were seeing something. You don't have that many things exploding in the air and firing and lights and sirens. Well, they wouldn't be doing that if there was nothing there, is a certainly reasonable thing to think, but the reality is, they can. People start shooting when there's a panic. I mean, this happens, it happens all the time. So I don't think there needs to be spaceships or incoming airplanes for people to just empty their guns, So.
No, and what surprised me a little bit was that they brought up the bombing of Pearl Harbor, because, as you say, I think that would be an argument against it being, that it could have been, because they say they were on edge. Of course they were. Their soldiers. There was a huge, bombing on the Navy attack. Of course, they are nervous, and someone sees something, starts shooting. The air siren goes off, and
throughout this episode, the word or the letters UFO are used to mean multiple things. And this is one of the struggles, I think, linguistically around talking about this topic. I'm a skeptical person. I don't believe we're being visited by aliens. But in the literal meaning of UFO as unidentified flying object, of course there's UFOs, right?
Yeah.
We see things we don't understand all the time. I mean, yes, absolutely. If you don't know what something is and it's flying, ta-da, you saw a UFO. But they also have UFOs meaning intelligently run alien craft, or something from another planet. And most people probably associate UFO with aliens, not with unidentified. The unidentified word means nothing, but UFO has so much cultural baggage with it right now. I think that's why they're switching to ATIP and all these other different UAPs. Sorry, UAPs. Sorry, unidentified aerial phenomena. It was like,
but
or what I like to think was it WTF WTs or. What the fuck was that? That was like, that should catch on.
Yeah, simple is better usually.
Yes, exactly.
But I think the word UFO need to go in some sense, because it doesn't mean what it are supposed to mean any longer, which make it.
And they hop all around historically in this episode. So they're gonna go and talk about other technologies and then go back and forward and back. I didn't hear anybody talking about Kenneth Arnold in here. Did you?
I'm not really familiar with Kenneth Arnold.
You are, I bet. He's the guy who first saw flying saucers, coined the term flying saucers. So he was flying an airplane in Washington State and saw a formation of craft that were actually sort of boomerang shaped. And he said that they were skipping, or they're flying through the air, bouncing like saucers skipped on the surface of a lake. And that became the origin of the idea of flying saucers. So what he saw was crescent shaped, but because he used the term flying saucer, it became what people were looking for. They're looking for discs.
Yeah.
And then very soon after that, in the same year, you get the Roswell crash, and everybody had been looking up in the air for flying discs. And so when they found this wreckage, they say, oh, it's a flying disc. And then, of course, they have to recant, which we'll get to. I don't want to take it out of sequence, but yeah, Kenneth Arnold is not mentioned. The initial flying saucer sighting is not mentioned. Yet, so much depends on that story and the context it came out of. So,
Interesting. Yeah, when you say it, I think I heard a story, but yeah, not a name. So,
yeah, I would say if you want to study this stuff, it is like one of the most important cases. And I don't mean it because, maybe it's real. What I mean is because it is the ground zero for when everybody started looking for aliens, right?
Yeah.
Like it really is. That's the point. Because what he described couldn't be accounted for by earthly aircraft if the things he described were accurate to what was really happening. To me, it's identical to what's happening right now with the UAP and the government, because you can misunderstand aerial phenomena so easily. The equipment can give you bad information. Your eyes can give you bad information. Your brain can give you bad information. There's at least 3 big vectors right there where things can be misunderstood. And so you combine that with our sort of limited power of language and how we have to share our ideas with other people who all have their own belief systems and bias and psychology. It becomes really complicated to get 100% accuracy about anything when we're talking. So it's really important. So Kenneth Arnold in that first sighting is really, really important culturally because it's where we get flying saucers from.
Yeah, that's really cool in a sense. Something that struck me here was that they actually had cameras on site.
Oh yeah. Didn't that look cool?
Yeah.
I mean, I was really surprised. I didn't expect that. I was like, oh, look, they're doing a reenactment.
Yeah.
But you did some work on this. It's not quite what it seems, is it?
No,
or is that right?
It's real. I thought they had, paid people to reenact for camera as part of the production.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like actors,
yeah,
right?
But then they actually show later in the episode that this is a yearly thing, just like Americans like to do, I don't know, Civil War.
Civil War battles. I live in the South, and I had neighbors who up until recently had a real Civil War cannon. It was a real cannon. It was not historically from the Civil War, but they took their cannon out and did reenactments. So we took it out to my grandfather's farm and shot a bunch of stuff. It was really cool. So, I mean, they only would shoot the powder rounds. They wouldn't actually put a cannonball in it. Because they're cowards. Okay, so it's that kind of thinking. Anyway, whatever. I wanted to blow some stuff up, so I was very excited about it. It's like,
no target practicing or watermelons or
no, but it made a lot of noise and smoke though. It scared the cows real bad, so it was a lot of fun.
I can imagine. We don't have much of them in Sweden. We do have one where we reenact a battle on Gotland between the Danish and the Swedish forces. Only reenactment I can think about, but that's medieval, so no cannons or...
We have a thing here called the Society for the Creative Anachronism, which is a medieval reenactment club, and they dress up in armor, and they have big battles. They're not historically accurate because everybody uses... wooden swords, but it is really fun to dress up and, run at each other screaming.
Yeah.
And, it's just like when you're a kid, you're playing, you're dead. No, you're dead. There's a whole lot of that going on. So.
Yeah, it can escalate quite quickly.
But it was good footage though. I mean, they bring in people. Well, I guess we shouldn't. They show the battle first, and then later on they bring in the people who actually saw it, right? This isn't all together, right?
No, they mixed up the little bit. Yeah. So we meet Littleton. He has been part of the series until now, and he is one of those people that show you that intelligent people can believe stupid things too. But he apparently was an eyewitness, and he claims to have seen UFO as the shelling continued.
And in a sense, there is a UFO in the sense that they thought they saw things and they were in the air and they couldn't identify them.
So it's...
But he doesn't mean that. He means alien craft, alien technology.
He means that there was an alien spacecraft and not the definition of the word.
And that kind of implies the aliens are kind of dumb because they're just sitting there letting everybody shoot at them.
Yeah.
I don't know. That seems
until they crash,
like,
even apparently.
not even going to move away, not going to hide, like, nothing like that. Possibly they're going to get shot and crash. Yeah,
Earlier in the season, they spread the seas and nuked a couple of clay-built towns, but well, getting fired on? No. And Little Tony also used this argument from authority, even. He says, quote, "I say this as a scholar." And then he said that the most efficient explanation is that today we call an UFO, something out of this world, something belonging to another technology. Okay, sure, he's a PhD in anthropology, so I don't really know how that makes him an expert in something he saw as a kid in the sky.
Yeah.
But
it's a stretch. So what this the Gods of Eden book that's coming up, have you read that or looked at that at all? I don't know what that book's about.
No, I haven't really got around to it. They just bring it up in the episode, and then we don't really hear anything on it.
I mean, anytime you see the gods of, and then anything to do with ancient technology, it's Von Daniken adjacent, or in that generation of ancient alien stuff. So
yeah, but basically, Gods of Eden is William Bramley's attempt to, explain weird things with more weird things. So everything from ancient pharaohs to the assassination of JFK can be attributed to ET, basically. But they bring it up, and then they basically just fizzle out. I think they use it to get to the Foo Fighters.
Yes. Yes, they do. Which is, I wanted to say something, though, because Bill Burns comes on at one point and says that, the more you have war, the more you're going to have UFOs. like they're watching us, pay-per-view or something. I don't know. They're not interfering, but they're going to show up and see what's going on, So it's very peculiar, though, because I think if UFOs are things you don't know what they are and they're in the sky, and you're in a war zone, more people are going to be looking to the air
to see if there's,
to see if there's an attack coming or whatever. In the age of aircraft, you didn't see more and more UFOs during medieval times because we didn't have airplanes. There was no reason to be looking into the sky. But as soon as we got as started using balloons in warfare, it became important to keep an eye on the skies. It really did.
Yeah.
And so I think it's absolutely natural that statistically, you're going to have more sightings of unidentified things if you've got more people looking to the sky with, anticipation of seeing things. So I really think that's a really dumb argument he's making there, but whatever. Yeah. But I did, and then we talk about bogeys coming in, and we get into Foo Fighters. Do you want to talk about Foo Fighters? You want me to talk about Foo Fighters, or?
No, you can talk about Foo Fighters.
Yeah. So in World War II, largely over Europe is where I mostly am familiar with the stories, but people go on these long bombing runs, and they're going to be dropping bombs over Germany and German-controlled territory. They started seeing glowing lights around the plane following them. And to me, skeptically, it seems like this is more akin to things like St. Elmo's fire, where you see you're flying in a very statically charged but nowhere to dissipate it kind of craft.
Yeah.
And so I think having these sort of phenomena is not that shocking. And the fact that they're probably electromagnetic phenomenon, the Foo Fighters affected the plane's equipment, I'm like, yeah, I could see that. It makes perfect sense. They probably didn't affect ancient wooden sailing ships because they didn't have any equipment that would be affected by that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But if you've got a plane that's got electrical and electromagnetic equipment, and you've got weird static energy discharges going off, yeah, I could see how that could affect equipment. So I don't think that's a stretch. I would love to know more about it, but it's not the kind of thing that we can easily afford to recreate. We can't send, propeller bombers over, European cities just to see about this Foo Fighter thing. But now it's become more of a folklore of ufology that it was intelligent. It was following our plane. maybe it's caused by your plane. That's that's the thing they seem to be missing. That yes, it's following your plane because you're making it.
Basically.
So I've been concerned because my father is constantly being pursued by farts. They're following him everywhere, and I don't know. You can't shake them.
Yes,
so I assume it's aliens.
Must be this weird alien technology trying to gas us.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's basically Foo Fighters, and they don't dwell it that much.
No, they do. They got some great visuals, but it seems like what they're really trying to do is get to this next section where David Childress says that what's really going on is that it's a mercury-powered anti-gravity device that is going up. They're like, they glow. This is the Nazis. The Nazis have developed this technology. They spin mercury around, and then it levitates, and then they can guide it to hover around the airplane and disable its systems. And I'm like, fuck you. That's not what it is. I was like, okay, you can go online and see mercury is absolutely can be impact. Like you can take electromagnetic fields and make it spin around. It's like a metal. It's like a liquid metal, like the T-1000.
You can,
from Terminator.
You can make a bunch of nice stuff with mercury, except being poisoned. You get that as a bonus.
Yeah, it's poison. But its anti-gravity properties are imaginary, I think is the right word. So he just says it. He just says that's what happens. You spin mercury around, it flies.
Yeah, but Childress has some strange fascination with mercury because he has brought up this before. So mercury, you can have found it all over ancient civilization, and they've used it to, power electricity and kill people and everything. So it's not weird for Childress to say it, because he makes up things about it all the time.
Did they talk about the first emperor of China?
Yeah, he brought that up in brief, and also the Persian.
That's a great story. Yeah. It's like, I wonder. It would be gorgeous if you think about just aesthetically. If you have a model of like the Forbidden City, and you put a river of mercury around it, it would be gorgeous, right? Yeah, that's what they claim is in that pyramid of the first emperor. They won't let you dig there, but I can't. It would have looked amazing, and it's wonderful folklore. And maybe there really was mercury used. I don't know, but it's not magic. It doesn't have any special properties other than it will kill you. It's like, it's
no, and they use this. They start to talk about the U-boats, or submarines, as you call it in Americas, and how we found submarines with mercury outside Norway, and I think they say Indonesia. And I was a bit surprised, and I actually went, and at least outside Norway there is a U-boat. Apparently it started to become a quite issue environmentally, since it's leaking mercury and nuclear material. So the plan...
Have they tried spinning it around to see if the U-boat will fly? No.
Maybe I should suggest that to the Norwegian government, to send down a magnet and just try to spin it.
Just spin it around. There you go. So
they're planning to cover it now with concrete, as we did in, I think it's Chernobyl.
Yes, maybe they should cover it with glass and make the world's largest thermometer.
Yeah, maybe. No, so there is U-boats with mercury, but the real story behind them is more interesting than the fake flying saucer version. So apparently Japan bought a lot of mercury from Italy and used Germany as the middleman, and
it's the Mercury Industrial Complex.
And then you might ask, well, why would Japan need some mercury? I didn't know it before, and you posted a little link there, but apparently, at least before, you made mercury, or you used mercury to use ammunition primers and detonators, and you linked, Lethal Weapon?
Exactly. In Lethal Weapon, there's a scene that do you ever do editing with clips? You could that clip. It's only like 3 seconds long, but
I can throw it in.
I remember Riggs says it's like Mercury switches kablooey. It's like, it's like, this is some serious shit, basically. So yeah,
Mercury switches kablooey. That's heavy shit.
I love that movie. So.
Oh, it was ages I saw it. But then...
So then they go to... I actually did not know this UFO crash. This was a new one for me. Everybody loves to say the Nazis were using UFO technology and trying to go to the moon. And it's like, oh, there's so much messed up and confused mythology around this. It really is. And some of this I blame on... are you familiar with the book, The Morning of the Magicians?
It's come up a couple of times. It's the French before Daniken, right?
It is. Von Däniken basically is a liqueur. And I think maybe Morning of the Magicians is more of a beer.
Yeah.
Like it's not nearly as concentrated with it's a broad spectrum. It talks about lots of things. It talks about alchemy. But it really is kind of the a lot of times when you're trying to track stuff culturally, you want to try to find out, well, where's case zero? Where does this come from? Morning of the Magicians is kind of the case zero for a huge amount of fringe information. The authors had just survived World War II, and they were very fascinated by what happened with the Nazis. How come all these good people could be misguided by one crazy demagogue with some weird ideas? And so they talked about, cults and occultism, Ariosophy, the world ice theory, all these kind of fringy things that were really popular in the Nazi leadership. There's not much evidence that Hitler himself was like an extremely occult person, but he surrounded himself with people who absolutely were enamored with occult ideas. Some of these come from theosophy, from a woman named Blavatsky, and she basically did this sort of thing where she collected information from lots of different religions, and she believed in this idea of root races. And of course, this idea that like there were all these different races and some of them were closer to the pure version than others. And that fed right into the sort of need for a Teutonic or Aryan, supremacy, this narrative, this myth that, that we're really important. Everybody has that like nationalistic kind of, our country's great, go team. But then they kind of tied it not just to their geography, but also to race, and believed in racial purity. And that's a terribly dangerous combination, because if you believe that your country's the best and that, you genetically are the best, why should you worry about anybody else? It takes the empathy away, right? You don't need to. Those are lesser people. We don't need to worry about them. And so
no,
I think it's very dangerous.
Yeah, it's a dangerous thing, and something I've noticed that they have a bit of racist undertone. You see it not as much in this episode, but for example, here you notice that the Germans would not have succeed with their other technology if they didn't capture this alleged UFO crash in Freiburg. Means Nora comes in and say that it was just thanks to American know-how that we beat the Germans in the war. But yeah, I couldn't find anything concrete about the UFO crash in Freiburg. I don't
think you're going to.
No, but I did stumble upon that there were some British boys that got lost pre-World War II. Apparently it was some big thing. Then I stumbled upon someone named Jan Van Helsing. Have you come across that before?
The only Van Helsing I know is from Dracula. So
yeah, but it seems as this UFO crash is built upon Jan. In some places he's named Jan. I'm not sure which one is correct.
Oh, and you've got also the Vril Society. Yeah. And the Vril comes from a fictional work by a guy named Edward Bulwer Lytton. Yeah. And he had a book called The Coming Race, which is about like sort of reptile people who live under the earth and have magic energy. That's something we've never heard about again. But his book is fiction and was so popular that Blavatsky and her theosophy people believed that he wasn't writing fiction. He was revealing a truth. Like, he says it's fiction, but obviously there's really lizard people with magic energy who live in the world. And Vril's amazing, right? And so that became this search for Vril energy is not that different from 0 point energy or all these other ideas that are tied to this stuff. So yeah, there's definitely a racist sort of theme I kind of have to blame Blavatsky for this, but I don't know that she was particularly malicious. I don't know that she was. She seemed to like really love every culture. Maybe, I don't know. She wasn't. I think she's a problematic person. She was definitely a trickster. She definitely manipulated people and used magic, like card trick type magic to fool people. But what happened is, as people distill her ideas, they become more and more racist, and it really does feed into. Again, I don't know necessarily why Hitler was a racist. I think that obviously anti-Semitism existed way before any of this, Brill stuff. But yeah, he used it, I think, to fuel his people. Like anything that sort of promoted his agenda was fair game, right? So
but this Jan Van Helsing, apparently his real name is Jan Udo Hawley. He's a known anti-Semite to that extent that several of his books are banned in Germany due to Holocaust denial.
Wow.
So again, it's problematic source they get this Freiburg crash from, to say the least. Hi, I'm just going to chime in here for a quick second. We're talking about the Protocols of Zion, or as it's originally known, the Protocols of the Sessions of the World Alliance of Freemasons and the Sages of Science. And it's a quite long-known hoax with deeply anti-Semitistic roots. So it originates somewhere in Russia, St. Petersburg, 1903, and it's been known quite early that it's a hoax, basically, but it's a nasty hoax that's been lingering for quite some time. I will attach to the show notes some more information about these documents, but if you hear it in conversation, you can be rest assured that these people might not be on the up and up. Let's get back to it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there is a part of the post-World War II Nazi culture, this sort of, you might say neo-Nazi, that love to, excuse me, they love to use stories of German technological superiority as a way to, imply that the racial superiority ideas are also as valid as the technological ones, and to get people to believe that that Hitler's still alive, that he moved to like Antarctic bases, or that he's on the moon. Like there's crazy ideas, but it's all got this Nazi core to it, and it's rotten, and it's like you can stack all kinds of pretty graphics and other ideas, but if you start with a seed of racist Nazi stuff, don't be surprised when the fruit of that is more racist Nazi stuff. That's really kind of where it heads,
On the account of Nazis on the moon, did you see the Finnish movie Iron Sky?
I have not watched Iron Sky or the sequel, which, if I remember correctly, is also theosophically tied. I think it's, hold on a second. I think this is kind of funny. Iron Sky 2, The Coming Race, Bulwer Lytton. It's, I knew it was tied in there somehow, but no, I haven't watched it, but I do have it. So it's on my to-do list. So, not out of an exciting sense of to-do, more like it's like my duty I need to know about this stuff because I want to be able to talk about it. Coaching.
Yeah, I saw it on cinema when it came out there, 2012.
Oh, really? Really? On the big screen? On the
big screen, or as big as come when it's a Finnish movie.
Well, so how did the audience like it? I mean, was it fun?
What I remember...
It looks pretty wacky. It looks pretty crazy.
It's really crazy. And it has this Scandinavian humor, I would describe it, that it's extremely dark, just like our weather and everything else.
Well, I saw that, Chris, in America, we've made many things that are really, people love. Like, I think television was really perfected here. The motor cars, it wasn't invented here, but it was really perfected here. And obviously Sharknado. So, things that, have really improved the world. No, I saw that there was another one of these type of movies that had Nazis riding sharks in the air, like flying sharks, and it was like, really, really, okay. But it seemed about the same quality here. So yeah,
I would say it's better than Sharknado, but it wouldn't have deserved any Oscars at least.
oh yeah, so that's called Sky Sharks. That came out in 2020. I assume that's because of the pandemic. I am not kidding. I'm going to put this in the chat for you. Hold on a second. How do I do that? Chat. At some time when you have finished everything else in your life that's important, you can take a look at that link.
I will bookmark it for later then.
Yes. Just you can postpone that as long as you need to.
How about we move on to Roswell?
Yes, exactly.
The alien thing that I think everyone has heard about to some extent.
Yeah, that's why it surprised me that they didn't do the Kenneth Arnold story, because without Kenneth Arnold, you don't get Roswell. Like, you just don't. Because what the Kenneth Arnold story did was it got everybody looking for flying saucers, and they believed that they were in the sky, and it creates this big media flap where everybody's reporting flying saucers all of a sudden, and people start faking them, all this sort of things happening. And so when Mac Brazel, this rancher, finds this weird garbage all over his property, it seems alien to him. So if you imagine, this is kind of like finding mylar, like a mylar balloon, a shiny silver material. It's very tough. It's flexible. You can wad it up into a ball. It goes flat again. It's like mylar, but it's 1947. Nobody's seen mylar. You know, it's a very new thing. And so he doesn't know what to make of this, but he knows that everybody's looking for flying saucers, and he thinks maybe this is one. Maybe it crashed here, right? But it's just pieces of stick like balsa wood and some tape and this mylar. But if you watch this recreation, there's smoke and wreckage, and this was actually milder than most of the recreations I see. They usually have big chunks of ship laying there and dead aliens and fire and radiation, all kinds of things. No, it was like literally bits of debris is what was really found. But what's happened is since 1947, the military first said it was a flying disc. They released a news story saying it was a flying disc, and then really quickly retracted that and said, oh, no, it's a weather balloon. And technically, it was a weather balloon in the sense that that's the same kind of balloon that it was. But it was doing a very special secret project at the time called Project Mogul, where they were taking listening and sensor devices up to high altitudes, looking to see if the Russians or anybody else was doing any kind of bomb testing. So this was about the Cold War. We've only been out of World War II for 2 years, and we're already like, we got to watch those Ruskies. We got to keep an eye on them. So if you don't keep an eye on them in 1947, the next thing you know, they'll invade Ukraine. So you got to keep an eye on them. So, oh boy. So anyway, but with the retraction sticks, the story goes away. And so it really just disappears until
was it the 70s?
Very late 1970, like 1979, 1980, right there. You start to get a few people, Stanton Freeman in particular, goes back and starts talking to Jesse Marcel, and who's the officer who had to do the retraction. And it becomes a story of a cover-up. And then as soon as that happens, it just blows up. Suddenly, everybody's got their story. And the whole town of Roswell, which is really an important town in rocket history, because that's where Robert Goddard was doing a lot of his research, becomes a UFO place. And so I've been to Roswell, and they've got a UFO museum there. It's in an old theater. It's really, they've really leaned into it and started making a good bit of money.
Yeah, I only seen
on this idea.
Seen a picture, so it's as crazy as media paints it out to be.
It is at times, like around the time of the anniversary in the summertime, they have a big festival out there to kind of like commemorate it each year. And they've, like you see a lot of, people sell alien, tchotchkes and, this, that, and the other bric-a-brac. And garbage. I don't know, what do you want to call it? It's fun. I mean, my office is full of aliens and monsters and ghosts. So I mean, I'm as much of a shopper as anybody else. But it's I don't think that the toys and the museums matter so much as all the stories, the books that have come out of it, and the documentaries, which, you know, it undermines people's faith in, you know, government honesty, and it undermines people's understanding of how technology works, because of stuff like Corso's and Burns' book about, you know, the aliens, you know, crashing, and we reverse engineered everything out of that. I'm like, no, you know, it's just not how that works. So I find it offensive intellectually. I do find those stories fun, but I also really hate the way they've corrupted our understanding of history, of how we got here.
They are, in a sense, dangerous in that sense that they makes it a bit lazy for us and the viewer too. Why question something when we can just say, oh, it's aliens? It's you stop looking for the proper answer that, well, in most cases can be even more interesting than an alien did it, in a sense. And we also have Linda Moulton Howe that they, for some reason, sent out on site.
She's on site, yeah. She's been around forever. She is a TV producer, and, you know, she does, and a journalist. And she became famous for doing a story about cattle mutilations in the 70s, or maybe right in 1980, called Strange Harvest. And it won a local Emmy. And ever since then, she has continued to pursue these sort of fringe stories. Well, she really got into a broader audience when she became a regular contributor to Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM show. And so she would, every, you know, week, she would come in with a new story, and like, she basically would just collect stuff, and she had a regular segment. Other people do that, but now, I mean, like, you know, people like Aaron Sagers and other people like would call in regularly and tell, here's what I heard. It's almost like a rumor hotline, you know, and it's like, but the rumors are all about fringe, you know, government conspiracies and UFOs and aliens and Bigfoot and that sort of thing. So that she's really leaned into that, and that's become her career. But she never fails to mention she has that Emmy. And I mean, I wouldn't either, probably, if I had an Emmy. So I don't blame her, but it has been a few minutes since she got that Emmy. So maybe,
she's getting the most of that Emmy.
She really, really, really is.
She were on in a previous episode talking about cattle mutilation. Didn't say much, but apparently she has contacts everywhere. And I think I didn't understand this Bob Wood thing that she got.
Okay, so what that's about is these she's tying these to the Majestic 12 documents. I think that particular document is a little bit different, but it's one tied directly to Roswell, and it implied that there were bodies at the crash. But I have to tell you, if you talk about it's almost like do you talk about religion much here? I don't know what your religious background is. I don't want to be offensive in any way.
It's fine. We're atheists, the whole Sweden. So.
Okay, super. I figured as much, but you know, I started out as a very religious person, have become an atheist, and so my family's still very religious, and I'm not afraid to talk about this, but I like to try to do it in a non-offensive way. That being said, if you look at the history of the Bible, especially like the Gospels, they're written, you know, 80 to 150 years after Jesus was said to have walked the earth. I'm kind of a mythicist. I'm not sure any of that's real, but the point is, all these retellings, there's inconsistencies in all of it, and what we're seeing here is like the emergence of a mythology about alien crashes. And so all of these documents, people make hoaxes. They're almost like pious hoaxes, and like it's almost like a relic from a saint or something like that, where it's becomes a tangible embodiment of this myth of aliens crashing. And so all these fake documents that somebody might have done for a laugh have become sacred text to the UFO true believer, right? I mean, they don't probably see it that way, but multiple religious studies people have looked at UFO culture and said, no, this is a religion. Like, you have to say, well, wait a minute, what's a religion? But it's a thing that's built on faith and practice. And I'm not a religious studies person, but it is absolutely fascinating to me. And if I could live for 200 or 300 years, I would probably take the time to get a religious studies degree as well as many other degrees, because the older I get, the more I realize I get little bits and pieces, but I really want to know what the hell is going on with our species. Why do we think the way we do? Why do we act the way we do? And these kind of things, we're seeing this emergence of this new thing. And it's also true for cryptozoology. All the Bigfoot tracks are like religious relics. It's all about this. I believe in a thing. Look, here's the evidence. I believe in that evidence, and so anybody can come and say, but that's not real. We know that the Shroud of Turin is not real. It's a 13th century hoax. Doesn't stop people from praying at it, to it, for it. It's just people have faith.
Yeah, and to be fair, they even were quite honest about it. So in a previous episode, Billy Barnes comes in and say, the more you're trying to convince me otherwise, the more I will still continue to believe. Yeah.
Yes, he most certainly will. Yes. I think, in his career, he runs a UFO magazine, and, he these appearances and stuff. He writes books about this. I think if your income is derived from your faith, that really helps you double down, because your house payment's now dependent on this being true, or if not true, at least plausible. So,
yeah. It's a bit of a motivator to continue, even if you would know otherwise. But I was under the impression that, how is it pronounced? Majestic?
Majestic. Yeah, Majestic 12. Yeah, MJ12 is probably fine. That's what most people say. Yeah.
But that they originated with Jamie Chandera or Bill Moore or something like that.
So I don't, I'm not, I don't have that to memory. I know that the Majestic documents are a hoax.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of, there's some problems with the type, like the typewriter that was used. It's interesting. People are experts on lots of things. If you're going to do a hoax, it's really hard. It's like if you're going to recreate an ancient text, you need the right age paper and the right kind of ink. You can make it look and fool an average person, but real experts can really dig in on this stuff. And so, I think Stanton Freeman, they tried to fool him. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, he actually realized it was a hoax, but lots of other people didn't. And so whoever was creating these documents tried to sort of shop it around by sending out film of it, right? Basically, so that you can blow up the film and say, oh, look at this. You don't get the documents, you get a photograph of the documents, and then those get reproduced. I don't have time for a huge anecdote, but I remember one time I went to in the 1990s, I went to a copy center to get some photocopies, because it used to be really expensive to get copies. You had to go to a building where they had copy machines. And I went in to copy some character sheets for my game, a role-playing game, because I'm a nerd. And while I was there, the people behind the counter were like, should we show him? Yeah, I think he looks cool. We should show him. And they slid this thing across the counter to me, and it was a big stack of government documents. They're like, you wouldn't believe this. You just missed it. This guy came in and he wanted us to photocopy these government documents. And look at this stuff. It's all about aliens. And so they gave me a copy as well. They were making copies for themselves. It's like whatever the guy came in for, he came in for his set of documents. And basically I got a copy of this kind of thing. And it was just all photocopies of these weird government documents about alien species and what's really going on. And it's very seductive to be exposed to what you believe is secret government information. It's like, I was, in my early 20s, like, oh my God, this is amazing, So now it's a lot harder to get me excited about this stuff, but it is still interesting.
Yeah, there's so much fakes out there.
There are.
But they bring up the Phoenix Light. I don't find those as interesting, and neither did the show really either.
No, they were very interesting in the 90s. In 1997 was a special year for me, because that was the year the Phoenix Lights happened. It was also the year that the Shoemaker-Levy Shoemaker-Levy? Yes, Shoemaker-Levy came over. I get that one confused with the Hale-Bopp. Nope, it was Hale-Bopp. Shoemaker-Levy is the one that crashed into Jupiter and left. It was huge, spectacular nuclear explosions all over Jupiter when these giant rocks hit the big eye, or they hit Jupiter, our biggest planet, and it was spectacular. But Hale-Bopp came in, and it it was the first comet I was ever able to like look up in the sky and see. It was just there all the time. It was just hanging in the air, just like in those medieval documents where they show you a star hanging in the sky. You're like, look at that. It's so peculiar because the tail may not be. It may be going in weird directions from where you would expect it to be. It's so neat. But it's not like a meteorite where it zips across the sky. It just hangs there. It's going really fast, but you can't tell. Anyway, that same year, that was when the Heaven's Gate cult killed itself, or the members killed themselves, and that was kind of tied to that incident. And so I started thinking, wait a minute, those cultists, they believed in UFOs and science fiction. They were web developers, but they also killed themselves. Like, how are they different from me? Why did they believe the UFO stuff's real and die? And I see the same information and don't, and I'm still alive. Like, why, how are these people who are so, it really broke my heart.
Yeah.
And so I decided to really start investigating this stuff more seriously because of that. And so I went on a UFO road trip. I went to a lot of different places around like Gulf Breeze, Florida. And one of the places I went was Roswell, New Mexico. And one of the places I went was Phoenix. And so at the time, it was really kind of an interesting mystery, but it turned out what was going on was the airplane was flying over for military exercises. They were dropping flares. As they're traveling in a line, dropping the flares, it creates this illusion of a giant. If we see 3 dots in the air, unless they're in a perfect line, we've just seen a triangle flying, right? I mean, that's what it's really not that hard to make a flying triangle. We see the lights and we fill in the craft. Our brain just does that. If I see lights in a triangle and they're in the sky, that's got to be a flying triangle, except that it doesn't. But it's a very compelling illusion. And so you can actually watch them dropping behind the mountain range and see them it's a perfectly good explanation. So we know what that is. It's not a mystery, but it will always be part of folklore because nobody in ufology lets a mystery go.
No, you can't disprove them in that sense. Can move on to Nick Pope. Hi, it's just me again. I'm going to chime in here a little bit again. We did actually meet Nick Pope only for a brief second though in episode 3 of the show, or episode 2 of Ancient Aliens, The Visitors. But again, he was just in for a quick moment. Let's get back to the show. He was a new character for me. Yeah.
Oh, really?
He has not been...
He's UFO classic. He's
you have come to understand that now. And well, if you don't know, he was part of the UK government to some extent.
Ministry of Defense.
And he had the alien desk, I think, for some time investigating reports from UFO and things alike. But he comes up and basically, he talks about the Suffolk UFO. Yeah.
I don't know much about that one. Now I do know Rendlesham Forest. I do know that story.
Yeah, but that's basically the same. But for some reason, they use the town Suffolk instead of the forest name. But yeah, they bring up that there's high radiation in the area, and apparently you can go and look at it was American forces, and there was a colonel.
Yeah. It doesn't look like Colonel.
Colonel Holtz, apparently he saw these lights in the sky, and the story has evolved since 1980.
It has evolved, yes.
So now I think some say they even saw the UFO land, but apparently Holtz went with a Geiger counter, and apparently he didn't know how to operate it. You can still hear his recordings of the investigation, but he talks about always up 7/10, let's say 7 units of the 5-point scale.
Up to 7/10 or 7 units, let's call it, on the 0.5 scale.
Which would roughly translate to 0.07 milliroentgens per hour. So normal background radiation. But again, someone who...
Yeah, they don't say that, right? They imply that there's the ground's glowing or something, you know, like it's like really dangerous radiation. It's not, it's not that, but it's definitely a story that's been blown up over time where, and the people who were the original witnesses, at least one of them has gone down the path of expanding on his story over the years quite a bit. Like the others, like they saw a thing, they came back and saw a thing later, you know. But the other guy's like, no, it communicated with me. I saw writing. I received numbers from it mentally. It communicated me in binary. And it's like, what? You know, no, it didn't. Anyway, it is an interesting story, but I find it mostly interesting because of the way the story's evolved and grown over time, exactly like Roswell. Because we're myth building. That's exactly what's happening. It's myth building. And so it's just going to keep growing. That's
part of human nature to some sense. And I think you might be more familiar with this, people using tools that they don't obviously know how to operate in their investigations.
Yes. Yeah. This happens in ghost hunting a lot, where people use electromagnetic equipment and don't understand things like, I'm using an EMF meter and I'm also carrying a mobile phone. Like, no, nothing could possibly be, you know, so no,
you have a bunch of electrical things on you, and then in this house without any powers from 1920.
It's got weird exactly.
Wait, my phone is ringing.
Yeah, it's like, what a coincidence. So yeah, no, it's just terrible. And Nick Pope is a good communicator, and you know, he had that job for more than 20 years, and it doesn't, you know, I think when he presents himself in that role, sometimes it sounds like he was, you know, like Project Blue Book out investigating. But I think the real thing, that office, a couple of things about that. One, he's a second generation person in the Ministry of Defense. His father was also in the so it's like a family legacy, you know. I just don't know how important that office was in protecting Great Britain from aliens. It seems more like he had a cushy and interesting government job, if you know what I mean. Like, it's just, I don't think, you know, it's not like, you know, he was out like taking samples and all that. It's not that. It's whatever this was. It's not what it seems like it is. So he's not Mulder, although that's constantly how it's described. And his wife looks suspiciously like Dana Scully. So I think in a lot of sense, he's doing a little bit of cosplay
but
there.
From the way he talked, at least in this episode, I also noticed that he had a new show with... on YouTube, I think now even. But the way he talked, he wanted to be Mulder from X-Files.
Yes.
And he seems a bit upset
so.
that they stopped his office after, what did they say, 50 years? They had this UFO disc or something.
Yeah, it was a while, yeah. I know he ran it for a little bit more than 20 years, so.
But then
I can't even imagine doing the same thing for 20 years, so.
Well...
except my wife. Anyway, so yeah, so Rendlesham Forest, I think, is a non-starter if you really dig into it. But fortunately, they didn't. They basically just mentioned it and moved on to the next thing, because that's what they do.
It's quick cuts all the time. Otherwise, they lose attention, I think, because...
maybe that's it, yeah. It's hard to keep a stoner engaged.
You need to be quick cuts and make them have the wow moments often, maybe.
And breaks for snacks, because we need some snacks.
But we move from these to exopolitics, which
Yeah. So they start out with Stephen Greer, who is a guy whose business is all about disclosure. And when I think about people who've really tried to sort of turn ufology into a religion, the faith, he has this idea that the governments know about all this stuff, that they're hiding it, but that they're planning at some point to release the information to everyone so we can all know. And that's called disclosure. And it's like Jesus coming back. It's never going to happen. Okay. Sorry. It's been 2,000 years. He's late. Okay. So, man, that sounds really harsh. Sorry. But disclosure is one of those. There's a technical term for
Yeah.
bullshit. It's not a thing that's going to happen. He's been ranting about it for years. Every time there's a story involving a government and a UFO, all the disclosure people get very, very excited. It's like an apocalyptic type thing. It's like here's the thing we're all waiting for, and so there's this idea of like when prophecy fails, it's this idea, they never stop believing that there's going to come that day. And every time there's an alien movie, it's believed that that's not an entertainment industry trying to make $300 to $1 billion on a movie. That's the government's preparing us for the inevitable, aliens who are coming. Now, why some of the aliens are good and some of the aliens are trying to destroy us, I don't know what their messaging is. They seem to be all over the place about what the aliens are up to. I mean,
they created us first, and then we were maybe slaves, and then we were something else, and then they helped us build pyramids and electricity, but never anything useful, like, I don't know, germ theory. I think most of the world have been a lot more grateful for germ theory than how to staple rocks in a neat shape.
Well, yeah, if you own cows or you own livestock, you treat that livestock to keep it alive, right? I mean, you feed it, you give it medicine. It may not have the best life in the world, but you do not want it to die. You want it to fulfill its purpose. So I don't know. I've seen no evidence that anybody's doing any care and maintenance on our species. Anybody except ourselves.
No.
So, and barely us.
We might even refuse to maintain ourselves.
Yeah, there's one point in here where they talk about the aliens are going to wipe us out and they're going to use a virus. And I'm like, aha, suckers, they failed.
Several times, because previously they brought up the plague as alien virus.
Exactly. So, about every 100 years we get a pandemic, you know. So fortunately, we've got another 100 years before you need to worry about that again. So
yeah, and I like the idea that the UN was founded just to speak with aliens.
They get lonely. So it's just like, well, this is, they talk about this in Morning of the Magicians, this idea that, that the aliens created us or accidentally created us. And then they go back to the works of H.P. Lovecraft and say, maybe H.P. Lovecraft wasn't a fiction writer. Maybe he was revealing something to us. Just like Bulwer Lytton and the Vril. It's the same thing. They take a fiction thing and they go, that's so cool. Wouldn't it be cool if it was real? Of course, and then it's just a small hop from there to it's real, but they're hiding it from us, So the interplay between fiction, fact, myth, and fantasy and reality is so fascinating to me. But you have to have some system to filter out what's legitimately something I should believe and what's not. And that's a skill and a technology. Those rational skills for evaluating things, you have to learn them. They're not natural. And if you don't learn them, I don't know, use your gut. And clearly 30% of us apparently are living by our guts. And I don't think it's healthy when you have this clash between people who basically have a different mode for interpreting what's real and what's not. That's again kind of a religious struggle. I believe you can have an understanding of reality and that there is a material world, and a lot of them think this is just a thing we have to endure before we get to the real world, which is all spiritual and magic and singing and happiness. So and aliens. Yep. Oh, exobiology and exopolitics. They talk about the UN being created to negotiate with the extraterrestrials. It's like,
and why?
Sorry, I live near an airport.
And we have some people from the Vatican talking a little bit.
Yeah, and they have the conflict between Greer. Stephen Greer thinks that religions will collapse, civilization will collapse, governments collapse, and the Catholic Church is like, aliens are fine.
Yeah,
we don't care.
And more people to
if God made us, God made aliens. There is that interesting question though. If first you have to believe there's a soul, that's a thing that intelligent creatures have, is like this spiritual soul. And then you have to believe that other creatures that are intelligent out there would also have a soul. And then you also have to believe that we fell. We fell in Eden. We didn't meet God's standards, and we sinned. But do we actually know that the aliens have fallen? Did they sin? Maybe they're still living in a pure state. I don't know.
Could be.
You know, but it doesn't matter, because like they're like, well, can aliens be saved by Jesus? Are the aliens going to show up, and like some people are going to be like, okay, welcome. Okay, we didn't believe in you, but here you are. But I think the first thing you need to know is you're a terrible sinner, and I need to introduce you to this 2,000-year-old dead guy who's going to forgive you for your badness. But you know, it's like, stop. You know, that doesn't make any sense. Right? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
so,
I also found it a bit amusing that Greer, well, it will collapse, and Christians basically, more people to save. And it leans back to, because in Catholic faith previously they have a lot of weird discussion about who to save and who to not. And back in the medieval times, it was common for them to have discussions. So there was a belief that somewhere there were people with dog heads living.
Cynocephalics.
Yeah. And the church talked, are those type of peoples worth saving? Do they have a soul? And from it seems like, yeah, they can be saved, and same with aliens, basically. But yeah, we then have Giorgio trying to tie up the bag, saying it was clear that the aliens did mix with our DNA and brought us all the technology, and they tried to tie up the seasons.
It's. I noticed he had the Sakura bird on his lapel, the little.
Yeah, it was part
pin.
of the first episode, the glide flag, the flyer from Egypt.
Yeah, they love that stuff. It's, you know, these things could really fly if you make the following modifications, right? It's like, and also build it out of foam, and also, you know, it's like just keep going on with all the things you have to change. Basically, it completely works. It's like stone soup. I don't know if you know that story about, like, you know, if you know the guy who's hungry. You can look it up. It's a great piece of little folklore about the stone soup. It's a guy who's hungry, all he has is a rock, and he like tells this lady he wants to make soup, and she's like boiling the rock, but it's like, you know what's really good at stone soup is you got onions and like, you know, and that's this is great. Do you have any salt? You know, because do you have any potatoes? Do you have any tomatoes? Do you have any cabbage? You know, by the time he gets done, this is fully, you know, it's not stone soup anymore, but it's delicious. It's like same thing. I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, we have a similar story, but with a button.
Oh, really?
So instead of the soup stone, they make the soup of the button on your shirt, and then you know, fill in with all the other stuff that they could find. yeah,
it's a good story because it's funny, but it's also true. You know, it has a powerful lesson in it. So yeah. Oh, and Graham Hancock shows up several times in this episode, which I thought was really funny to me because, you know, his books are largely about the idea that there was a civilization that lived about 10,000 years ago and was lost. And then eventually that collapsed civilization led to every major civilization that we know about, right? So he defends himself. If someone calls him an ancient alien theorist, he gets mad and says, that's not what my books are about, which is true. His books don't really talk about ancient aliens for the most part. But here he is on the show talking about ancient aliens. So if I ever get to talk to him, I'm going to have to say bullshit because he's clearly supporting the ideas right here, even if it's not in his books.
He has been part of the season a lot. And he's clearly on the ancient alien. He maybe not say it that it's aliens, but how would these primitive people, as he liked to call it, have made such a fantastic structures, and then he leaves it on a cliffhanger for you to fill in the alien part.
Right. And it could be you would be in this show, you would fill in aliens. If you read his books, you would fill in maybe something like Atlanteans, right? You know, so it could be terrestrial, but it's some superior version of culture that's been lost to us, you know. So and even though that's more biologically plausible, also bullshit. So
and that basically ends the episode. We have what I like to call him, French Lex Luthor. To close out Robert Bauval. is his name famous for the Orion constellation theory?
Oh, yeah. They're in a line in the belt of Orion, but not a perfect line. And the offset is supposed to match the pyramids of
And
Giza.
the Street of the Dead in Mexico, Tenochtitlan there, and other places. Is it 3 in a row? He will claim it's part of the Orion's belt.
There you go. So no.
No. Yeah.
It won't hold up Orion's pants, and it won't hold up this theory.
Yeah, that theory is quite ludicrous on itself. We spent parts of a previous episode here talking about it, and in that episode they show you how the lines cross all of these ancient sites, and I went to Google Map and mapped it out, and nothing matched any longer.
Oh wow, yeah. But that sounds like. Did they talk about ley lines at all?
Not here.
Sounds like
I haven't counted ley lines because when I was out on real archaeological digs, we tend to have those dowsers go around and walk around in our fields, and we used to put out 1 by 1 meter squares. And they are in these squares and say, oh, this is ancient lines here. I can feel something is in here. So, yeah, I'm familiar with ley lines, but not from this season, at least.
Yeah, it seems to be one of those ideas that won't go away, and as like dowsing and other things. So, yeah, it's like dowsing's fun. We talked about in research of they had a whole episode on In Search of on dowsing, and it's like there's water under the ground most everywhere. So if you walk around with a stick and say there's water there is. You just have to dig for it. Yeah. So some places closer to the surface than others, but dowsing's not real, but it's almost impossible to convince someone if they've ever had that experience of dowsing successfully. It's almost impossible to convince them that that's just your brain tricking you. You know, it's like a Ouija board or whatever else. But so anyway,
on dowsing, what's the magician? Oh, I feel bad for this now. Uri Geller's worst enemy. Yeah,
James
Randy.
He
was a lot
the amazing Randy
with dowsing. He wasn't even allowed near when they did dowsing tests, as I remember.
Yeah, he really was great. I met him several times. He was on the show a few times, and we've met at conferences and stuff. So he loved debunking nonsense so much. He really did. But he also loved performing. So if you see him, like, yes, you would get great stories and like understandings of how he would like prove things were fake. But also he would like turn a napkin into a thing and like make coins disappear. He's such a fun guy. So I wanted to say though that the whole episode, and I've watched a few of these, but probably not as many as you have, nor as many as you're destined to. But this reminds me of in the old struggles between creationists and young Earth creationists and Darwinian evolution people. There's this guy named I think his name was Dwayne Gish, and he used to do a thing called the Gish Gallop, and he basically would be in a debate, and he would just say so many wrong things so fast it was almost impossible to refute them because it was just boom, bitty boom, bitty boom, bitty boom. And so that's how these episodes are. It's just one wrong thing, wrong thing, wrong thing, wrong thing. It's like you don't even have time to process it. You're just overwhelmed with the nonsense. And it's shiny, pretty nonsense. And so it's like, I think maybe that's the harm in this, you know. And sure, I bet most people just watch it for fun. I can't believe they think that, you know. No. But after about 6 beers, wait a minute.
It's starting to make sense, yeah.
There might be something to this. Sorry.
And unfortunately, the recording cuts off here. We had some technical issues, so the last 4 minutes were lost on Blake's end. But don't worry, I will wrap it up here for you instead. If you want to hear more from Blake, you should head over to monstertalk.org, where you can find his show, of course, named Monstertalk, the science show about monster that he hosts with his co-host, Dr. Karen Stolsnow. You should also head over to patreon.com/inresearchof to listen to his other show, In Research Of, that he hosts with archaeologist and author Jeb Carr. And the Patreon feed is open for everyone, so you don't need to be a Patreon to listen in there. So you should head over. You will find links to all of this, of course, attached to the show notes if you want to go and look this up later on. And you should, definitely, if you haven't already. And again, a big thank you to Blake Smith, who took the time to indulge us with all these stories and all this fantastic information. It's been an info-packed episode, to say the least, and links to his shows will be found in the show notes attached to this episode. And remember that you will be able to find reference and further reading suggestions at the same place. And remember to leave a positive review anywhere you can, such as iTunes, Spotify, or maybe to your friend at the trench. I would also recommend you to visit diggingupancientaliens.com to find some more info about me and the podcast. You can also find me on most social media sites, and if you have comments, corrections, and or suggestions, or you basically just want to write an email in all caps, you can also find my contact info at the website. Until next time, keep shoveling that science.
Lost the chat. There's no chat. Why is there no chat? Oh, it's over here. It's a tab. Okay, there it is. Sorry. I was looking for it on the bottom. Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this episode. Remember that we have a subscription going on. You can become a patron or other subscriber for as little as $2.50 per episode. Go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support. That is, go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support to read more information and sign up right there.